the editor-in-chief of The Athletic DC. He wrote a great piece that you should all check out right now. He's David Aldridge, back here on The Rich Eisen Show. How are you, DA?
Rich, I'm good, man. How are you doing? Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you, too. I give you the floor on your memories of David Stern, first blush, now that he's passed on at the age of 77. David?
Well, it's kind of hard to kind of encompass all of it in, a soundbite. He was a consequential person with regard to a sport which is now the second most popular sport on earth behind soccer. And he had a lot to do with that, both domestically and internationally. People have asked me over the last 24 hours or so, some variation of, well, he had Michael Jordan, he had Magic Johnson, he had Larry Bird. And I grant you all of that. That's exactly true. He was very fortunate that not only those players, but Charles Barkley and Michael Jordan and Patrick Ewing and Isaiah Thomas and John Stockton and Karl Malone, all of those players came into the league basically at the same time. He created the platform upon which all of those players became superstars. He was the guy that created opportunities for people to see those players not only on the court, but also be able to see them off the court, to be able to watch them on videos, to be able to watch them around the world with the rights deals that the NBA made with all of the various countries, to see them in Olympic competition on an enormous stage with the Dream Team. All of those things were because David Stern wanted those things to happen, or at least was able to make them bigger. I ask people, frequently, if Mike Trout was walking down Hollywood and Vine, how much notice would he get?
Right.
He wouldn't get a lot of attention. And that's not a critique of baseball, but it just tells you that, it doesn't happen in every sport with every superstar. And it did in the NBA under David Stern.
So how did he do it? Because, obviously in the NFL and its star players, there's the issue in many different ways. Also, face mask just in front. You don't see the face of the player in the same way that obviously you would for Major League Baseball. And there is nothing out there except the player on an NBA court and the uniform he's wearing. What did Stern actually do?
Well, the important thing, I think the biggest thing was that he put the attention on the court. I mean, you remember when he got there was that infamous LA Times story that said 75% of the league was on drugs. The games were on tape delay, so even if you were an NBA fan, I remember watching finals games at 11:30 at night, if you wanted to watch them, because that was the only way you got to watch them. He instituted the salary cap, which allowed teams, all teams really, to be able to field competitive teams because the Lakers weren't spending 4 times as much on salary as everybody else. The main thing was that he put the emphasis on the game and on the floor and let people see his players, see those players, do what they do, which is perform at incredibly high levels. So I think that was the first thing, and in addition to that, he really pushed the league's corporate sponsors to use players in advertisements. That was not normal when he did that. You didn't see black players selling shoes or selling soft drinks or selling hamburgers. That didn't happen. He was able to do that through his whatever force of personality, intimidation, threat to go somewhere else. Right. He was a negotiator, a businessman, as well as, an entertainment guy. But NBA players started being seen on commercials. That happened because of David Stern, and that was a huge sea change in terms of, to your point, people recognizing these star players in this sport, whereas in other sports they did not. They weren't given those types of opportunities.
Well, as long as we're kind of hitting the way back machine as well, David, I mean, just a year after he became commissioner was the famed 85 draft where Patrick Ewing, he pulled the envelope out of the ping pong ball, I guess, tureen, if you will, and out of the envelope logo was the Knicks logo.
Right.
There's still so much Oliver Stoning about that. Do you think there was there's any smoke to that fire about what happened in that '85 draft with Ewing going to the Knicks?
Well, as I have often said, Rich, if the NBA is in the business of conspiracies, it really sucks at it. Okay. Because,
I love that, David. That's great.
If it was all about making New York good, how's that working out? You know what I mean? If it was all about making Chicago good, how's that worked out since Jordan left? So it's ridiculous, and it's easy to say because you don't require any proof. And if someone says this is ridiculous and here's why, that's just more evidence of a conspiracy among people who believe in those sorts of things. So there's nothing you can do to keep people from doing that. Every year before the draft. If the Knicks or the Lakers are involved, they're going to get the first pick. We all know it's rigged. And then when they don't get the first pick, like neither of them got last year, and they didn't get the second pick either, people say, well, they're just doing this to make New Orleans good because New Orleans lost Anthony Davis. Yeah, because the real emphasis of the NBA is to make sure the New Orleans market continues to thrive. Come on. So you can truck in those things if you want. I don't believe in them. That I would never say never about anything, but the ability to pull that off require the same amount of ability it would take to cover up the Kennedy assassination for the last 50 years, which a lot of people still believe. So
Right.
What are you going to do?
David Aldridge here on the Rich Eisen Show. To me, I'd say one of the most important, if not the most important things that David Stern did, or his handling of a situation when he was commissioner, was Magic Johnson having to leave the game because of being HIV positive and then returning to the game. I've got Charles Barkley on in hour number 3, and I'm wondering what you can bring to light about David Stern's handling of that matter and its importance, David.
Oh, well, there's no question. I really do believe, Rich, that, the NBA's response to Magic Johnson being HIV positive was one of the first. It wasn't the first, but it was one of the first real turning points in terms of public awareness and understanding about HIV and AIDS. Because look, we all thought the same thing. We conflated HIV with AIDS. So if you had HIV, you had AIDS, and if you had AIDS, you're going to die. That's what we all thought back in the 80s, and so the league was able, and it wasn't just, that was not just crackpot theory. There were NBA All-Stars who believed the same thing, who believed that if Magic sweated on them, they could get HIV. And so the league had to be very out front on that, and in saying that he was going to play, not just in the All-Star game, but on the Dream Team. That was, you can't fathom how big the Dream Team was in 1992. And the fact that he was allowed to play, encouraged to play on that team, was just a huge, I think, turning point in people's understanding and maybe empathy towards others who had HIV and AIDS. And again, Stern was right in the center of the league's kind of evolution on that, because it was not a linear decision. It took them some time to reach that decision. It took them a few weeks to reach that decision. But after consulting with the top medical people at the time, they did reach that decision.
And was it true that he basically told some of the players in a meeting that he was in that if they didn't agree to let Magic back in, or at least be on board with the decision, that he would HIV test the entire league? Because if they wouldn't allow Magic back in, he had to find out who also needs to be out? Is that true?
I think that there's probably some truth there. I don't know if it was specifically in a meeting,
right,
or if this was conveyed to players, individually as they and their agents called the league. But that was certainly conveyed to those players that if you wanted me to test Magic, then we're going to have to test everybody. And I don't think anybody wanted that smoke, Rich. So
right.
That was a quick decision. And again, the way he played in the All-Star game and the incredible performance he put on that day really, I think, started to kind of ease people's uncertainty and discomfort with playing on the floor with him and against him.
Last one for you, David. You got a good personal story of dealing with David Stern where you might have been on the wrong business end, or anything, or a story that leaps to mind about David Stern?
No, I got cussed out. I got cussed out many times by David Stern. Many times.
How so? What
on
do you
the
mean?
phone. Oh, it was almost always involving the lockout. I'm old enough that I covered 3 of them. So,
wow,
crazy. It was not fun. Those are not fun, Rich.
No.
Those are not fun times at all.
Nope.
And because of the difference between the union, which is comprised of 400 players, each of whom has an opinion about this, and has dozens of lawyers that are also willing to talk to you about it. The NBA had one person speaking for it, and that was David Stern, because he threatened everybody else with 6 or 7 figure fines if they talked, including owners. I mean, he fined Michael Jordan. He fined Mickey Harrison during lockouts. He fined Ted Leonsis during lockouts for seemingly innocuous things they said during those lockouts about one issue or the other. So he wasn't playing around. So you just didn't have access to a whole lot of league people. And so what would happen is that when you're covering it, you would talk to union people who would tell you this is what we want, and this is where the league is being unreasonable. And so you would put that out there. And David didn't like that because he made it seem like, you were back in the union in this. So he let you know about it vociferously, profanely. And it happened multiple times over the years while I was covering the league, And it was just so different. You get in screaming matches with people all the time. People don't like what you wrote or what you said or what you did. And, and those things all happen, and it's part of doing the job, Rich. I'm sure you've had issues over the years with people. You don't take it personally. You don't remember them. I remember when David Stern cursed me out. It was an event when David Stern cursed you out because he made you feel like about 2 inches tall. But again, if you had your information correct, he would be willing to listen to what you had to say.
That's the most important thing, having your information correct. Love the call, David. Thank you. Happy New Year to you and yours. And let's chat about actual sports as opposed to life and things like this. We'll chat down the road.
Rich, my best to you and your family
Thank you.
well. Happy New Year. Thanks for having me.
Right back at you at David Aldridge, D.C.
For more of The Rich Eisen Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV for free on BR Live or download the Rich Eisen Show app.